Hello, I am Anawiltos bringing you some more science fiction power scaling. This is the #1 show on science fiction power scaling on all of YouTube. Trust me, I have looked for another one and I have not found any. Now, if you do know somebody else that does this, please do tell me because I would love to get into contact and collab. But anyway, right now, I'm going to talk about what you are seeing on the screen right now, and that is none other than the Constitution class in Star Trek, the original series. And what I'm going to talk about specifically is the kind of firepower as well as the kind of defensive capabilities it has, specifically relating to the TNT equivalent of its durability as well as its firepower. Now, of course, it is important to note that these things are all very variable because for plot reasons, the conceptual firepower or defensive capabilities may change from episode to episode. And this certainly is true on some other things in Star Trek, specifically with the sizing of the Klingon bird of prey in the TNG era. Of course, that is reconcilable by saying that there's different sizes of a bird of prey, even though upscaling a design technically isn't always the best design idea to make, to be honest. It isn't a very effective design idea, but it is reconcilable if you think of it that way, because I do not believe that some of the situations that we see in the next generation, you'd have an enormous bird of prey either being really weak or a tiny bird of prey either being really powerful. So, back on track anyway. When I say the TNT equivalent, I am, of course, talking about it's a measure of energy. So, to be exact, when I say a TNT equivalent, it is measured in tons of TNT, and 1 metric ton of TNT has the equivalent explosive output energetically to 4.184 gigajoules. So that's a lot of energy. In fact, when we hear about the tons of TNT and measuring such things, frequently you'll hear stuff like kilotons and megatons, especially when relating to nuclear weapons. And it is important to note that, as far as I know, there hasn't actually been any conventional weapon, as in a non-nuclear weapon, that has reached a kiloton of TNT equivalents in the amount of energy it puts out. But generally, the types of nuclear warheads that are on missiles in the US tend to be in the mid-kiloton range. Of course, things change depending on where you are and what you're doing. However, the most powerful weapons, nuclear weapons, you'll see be in the low megaton range, with 50 megatons for the Tsar Bomba and 100 megatons for its highest conceptual yield, or the B-41 nuclear bomb having a conceptual yield of 25 megatons. So hopefully everybody's keeping up with what I'm trying to say here. But anyway, we have some clues from dialogue in Star Trek, the original series, about some of the power scaling that we can go here. So this isn't going to be a full-scale video where I'm going to look at all the quotes. But if somebody wants me to make a video like that, I would be happy to. Just give me the word on it. I'll just assume that everybody knows what I'm talking about for the moment. I'm going to assume that everybody knows, that everybody has seen Star Trek the original series and will be able to tell what I am talking about. Okay, so as for the defensive capabilities of the Constitution class, we hear in a couple of episodes, one of them is The Balance of Terror, and the other one is Tomorrow is Yesterday. Two of the original series episodes where in The Balance of Terror, the Romulans were resorting to using nuclear weapons in an attempt to damage the Enterprise so that they could... I don't remember whether they were trying to retreat or counterattack. But there was a fight, and they decided that they believed that nuclear weapons would be effective against the Enterprise. Now, of course, you might say, well, nuclear weapons can have very variable yield, a highly variable yield. So, of course, that brings me to the episode Tomorrow is Yesterday, where it takes the Enterprise back into the 20th century. I probably should have looked up what specific time frame. Okay, it's 1969. I just looked it up. So the USS Enterprise goes to the year 1969. So this gives us a time frame for what type of nuclear bombs we would have. Now, of course, the airing date is 1967. So 1969 was still the future. So, of course, when power scaling, we do have to consider that we can allow for a fictional increase in nuclear yield. But nevertheless, it is notable that in the US, in 1969, you wouldn't have enormously powerful 100 megaton bombs or anything of the sort. The highest design, I believe, for a bomb in the US was 25 megatons. I'm just quickly looking up what year. That was in the 60s. Okay. Maximum yield of 25 megatons for the B-41 three-stage nuclear weapon, which probably would not have been carried by the airplane that was sent out to intercept the Enterprise. But if you look at the dialogue of the episode, Spock does state that the Enterprise could be severely damaged by getting hit by a nuclear weapon of the year 1969 coming from the US, which Spock would have known, or at least I believe he would have known, that the yield was at most in the low megatons and possibly into the mid and high kilotons, depending on what specific type of bomb was going to be launched. Because the plane that was coming after the Enterprise wasn't a bomber, so it wasn't going to drop the biggest bomb. It was going to have a probably kiloton yield missile, but for the purpose of this argument, we're going to say that we're going to highball it to at most 25 megatons. So we're going to say that 25 megatons of TNT equivalent is enough to heavily damage a Constitution class from the TOS era that I'm assuming that the calculation would have included the shields being up. Because why wouldn't they raise their shields if you think they're going to get fired on? That's just logical. It's logic. Why wouldn't they? So the calculation puts it that 25 megatons is enough to burst through the shields in order to go through the hull and damage some systems, at least, inside a Constitution class of the time. Now, this isn't counting transferring all power to shields, because that is an entirely different calculation to make. An entirely different calculation, because if we calculate that, then it may be much more durable. But for now, I'm just going to say 25 megatons is the highball of the minimum amount to do that kind of damage to the Constitution class. And I'm saying it's an extreme highball. I'm going to say that it probably was not talking about this type of bomb, but I'm going to give them the benefit of a doubt, since 1969 was still the future back then, and they believed, well, not they believed, but in the show, the eugenics wars happened, and they had space flight at the time of the eugenics wars with the cryogenic stuff. So I'm going to give them the benefit of a doubt and say that maybe in universe it could have been as high as that. I'm not going to go any higher than 25 megatons, though. I'm not going to say that, 2 years they advanced to having planet-busting weapons, and let's raise the stakes. Solar system busters, and the Constitution class just shrugs those off like it's nothing. No, that's not a fair comparison to make, and I think that's really a very unfair thing to say. And I'm not saying that those people who would argue against me are claiming these things, are making these claims. That's not what I'm saying. But anyway, offensive power wise, we can calculate this, and I'm going to say that photon torpedoes and the phasers are probably at least in the low megatons, probably. And my reason for saying this is because we have a couple of episodes where they reference an order that let me just see if I can look it up on the internet. It's referenced by Garth of Izar, who is said to have given this order. It's a type of not genocide, but that was the intent of the order. General Order 24. Okay, General Order 24 is an order to destroy all life on an entire planet. This order has been given by Captain Garth on Antos 4 and Captain Kirk Eminiar 7. On neither occasions was the order actually fulfilled. So my understanding, based on the dialogue in the episodes, of what this order is that the order is essentially an order that says to destroy a civilization on a planet. Now, I'm not going to highball the Enterprise as being powerful enough to bust a planet. That's just absurd, in this context anyway. But this means that the Enterprise would have at least the power to destroy cities. Now, maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, and I have to explain what actually happened in the episode. So, in the episode, I think it's A Taste of Armageddon, Captain Kirk is captured, and he gives General Order 24 to the Enterprise, which is in orbit, and what they say in the dialogue is that they have targeted all the cities on the planet with their phasers and their torpedoes, and that if the planet doesn't surrender, they're going to shoot and destroy every single city. So essentially destroy the entire civilization on the planet. Now, I'm going to say that in order to do this, I don't think weapons in the low kiloton range would be enough. Now, of course, I can't say how big the planet is. I only know that the planet has a similar gravity level to Earth. Otherwise, Captain Kirk would have been in a lot of trouble when walking on the planet. Another thing is the general dispersion of how big a nuclear blast is can be more easily calculated in a place that has an atmosphere, because in space the nuclear blast is mainly composed of the matter of the bomb itself as well as a lot of radiation. But in an atmosphere, you have the entire matter of the atmosphere that is affected, that allows you to more easily calculate a nuclear blast. So there's this website, I think it's called Nuke Map or something like that, where you can calculate exactly how big a nuclear blast would be, and potential casualties, and how wind would work in order to do that. And it calculates using kilotons, so you can calculate around with kilotons. So I looked at the maps, and I was thinking, well, to destroy cities, to have a reasonably complete destruction of cities, and assuming that you're destroying all the cities on a planet in a reasonable amount of time, you'd have to be at least in the low megaton range, in destructive capability. So that's where I'm going to put the USS Enterprise, the Constitution class. I'm going to put the TOS era Constitution class in the low megaton range, at least in destructive capability as well as endurance. I think that's really where it balances out. If you want me to go more in depth and to show you the quotes and to show you the nuke maps and to do all that stuff, I'd be happy to do it. It's just that this series hasn't garnered too much interest, so I don't really see a point in putting the work into doing that at the moment, but if somebody wants me to do it, I would be glad to do it. So anyway, thank you all for watching. Tell me what you thought. Do you disagree? Do you think the Enterprise is significantly weaker than I made it out to be, or significantly stronger? And if you have numbers, I would like to have them. And another thing I'd like to say regarding power scaling in science fiction. A usual feat that people use is the destruction of an asteroid. But a problem I have with that is that there's a lot of variables involved. You need to know the mass of the asteroid, the volume of the asteroid, and to know the volume, you need to know the external geometry and the internal geometry as well, because you don't know if it's a hollow asteroid straight from the get-go. And you also need to know the composition of the asteroid and the density of the asteroid. The density is very important. It's a lot more difficult to destroy dense objects than it is to destroy very loose objects. Just think about, from a martial arts perspective, for example. If I were to punch a piece of styrofoam, it would be a lot more easy to break than punching a piece of wood. And that's true. So, and it also depends, the composition itself can count into this, because let's say you are shooting something, but the thing you're shooting is somehow explosive. Now, of course, in science fiction, one might say, well, in the solar system, the asteroids have a general kind of composition. There's some variation in there. Some of them have a bit more iron nickel. Some of them have a bit more ice. Some of them have some nitrogen in it, and various things. But the thing is, you're talking about a fictional universe, so you don't know what the composition is of an asteroid in a certain star system unless it is specifically told to you in the dialogue or however that the asteroid has this composition, this volume, this mass, and all these things that would be relevant to making these calculations. Now, I'm not saying you can't make calculations. You can say, well, if this asteroid had this composition and if we can calculate its volume to be this, and it has this mass, and this density, and this internal geometry, then of course we can say that it would take this much energy to vaporize this asteroid. That's perfectly fine, it's just that you don't know, in most cases, what these asteroids are made of, because, for example, in Stargate, you've got Naquadah. In Star Trek, you can have trilithium. Well, I don't think you'd find that in an asteroid, but there's various minerals that you can find in Star Trek that you probably wouldn't know about in real life, and therefore wouldn't know the chemical properties of, or the density that it would default to in a microgravity environment. So that what I'm saying is that asteroid destroying feats are all good, but they're not good enough, because they can tell you something if you make a lot of assumptions, but the problem is you're making a lot of assumptions, so it's difficult. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Hopefully this has been entertaining and enjoyable, and ideally someone has learned something, and even more ideally, somebody can tell me something that I don't know in the comment section below, so that I can make better quality videos, can give better quality information, and even correct old information if it is inaccurate, which I would be very happy to do. Please do tell me if I do make a mistake somewhere. So thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time on Awiltos Over and Out.